The PG film creates another pair of challenges here. First, not only are the upper limbs disproportionately long by human standards, the length is not achieved by merely elongating the forearm. In other words, the upper arm is elongated as well. Her elbow is in the proper position. Second, her wrists and hands are also seen to be moving. No explanation for this has ever been offered by the debunkers. Ape attribute number 3, width. A philosopher of our time, Stephen Wright, once remarked, "Some people are afraid of heights, but I'm afraid of widths." A rather large Hollywood problem in duplicating ape men is getting an average-sized 200-pound human actor to impersonate an 800-pound monster. The accepted solution is to bulk up the actor with foam padding to stimulate girth and muscle mass. It is used with form-fitting foam padding attached to the actor in a separate layer underneath their fur suit. Hollywood thinks quite highly of it because it does indeed make the subject look bulkier. But, as with everything else in the realm of illusion, there is a trade-off. As far as Chewbacca goes, although he has since turned into a bona fide icon of his age, he was not the first franchise of science fiction to duplicate a Sasquatch. That dubious honor rests with Star Wars' on-again, off-again challenger for sci-fi supremacy, Star Trek. Star Trek's effort deserves serious attention, for it occurred in the late 1960s, barely a year before the PG film. It occurred in the original series episode Private Little War, where the heroes visit a primitive planet where hunter-gatherer humanoids endure an unforgiving landscape, beset by warring tribes on one side and man-eating white apes on the other. Man-eating white ape? At this point, need we look any further? White fur, about 6 feet tall, with spikes growing out of their backs, vicious enough to attack on sight, and otherwise generally unpleasant. Figure 7. Star Trek was seen by NBC at the time as their black sheep bastard son, forever being harassed about plot lines and being bumped around time slots whenever the network saw fit. Not to mention a budget per episode that would bring tears to the eyes of any other show. Despite that, the producers wanted a realistic man-eating white ape, and they went about getting one. The result is especially notable for its ingenuity. No extra hair, minimal wrinkles. They accomplish it with the second aforementioned method of hair application. Separate pieces of thick hair covered foam rubber for each arm and leg of the ape actor. But while this process does eliminate the wrinkles and the jiggles, to get enough foam to simulate ape muscle, at least 2 inches was needed. This buries the average actor in thick, constricting foam on every limb of his body, radically ballooning his proportions. The white man-eating ape in question looks like a butterball, a 2-month-old baby with 4 months' worth of body fat. The padding process as a whole is problematic at best, and the application has to be carefully tempered lest the actor and ape suddenly look like an homage to the 5-year-old boy bundled up for school by his mother against the Midwest winter in the movie A Christmas Story. Such problems were faced by the producers of the $6 Million Man when, in the sequels to the Bigfoot episodes, Andre the Giant was replaced by Ted Cassidy, a man of striking height, 6'9", but of precious little width. His proportions were sufficient for making a career out of playing Lurch on the 60s sitcom The Addams Family, but nowhere near Bigfoot dimensions. Foam padding was applied to give Mr. Cassidy the required bulk, figure 8. A unique observation is available here, for Mr. Cassidy had a brief role as a villain in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where in order to intimidate Paul Newman, Mr. Cassidy takes his shirt off, revealing a finely defined chest and abdominal muscles. As Bigfoot, however, Mr. Cassidy is reduced to a flat chest. No chest, no stomach differential at all. Zero muscle definition. All of Mr. Cassidy's hard-won sculpted body, which probably earned him the Bigfoot role in the first place, is buried and entombed under inches of flat and visually bland foam. But getting back to Star Trek, after all that trouble to get their 800-pound ape, we have a visual disaster. Whereas the wrinkles were gone, the seams were not. After applying 2 inches of foam on his shoulders and arms, in order to let the actor keep his range of motion for the very athletic jumping and fighting the script called for, the foam could not have any connections with other body parts. Watching the episode, one can see a thick arm attached to a thick body with no continuity in the skin at all, and a seam at the shoulder as blatant as the San Andreas Fault. But the worst is yet to come. Whereas 800-pound man-eating white apes do indeed have the bulk to create the illusion of 800 pounds, they also occasionally have to pick up helpless actors to either hurl them across the stage or carry them off to their lair. To that end, the ape actor needs his hands. In Private Little War, whereas the ape has biceps to make Mr. Olympia weep, he is nevertheless stuck with out-of-proportion human-sized hands, i.e. regular-sized hands on the end of steroid-induced arms. A blatantly evident visual contradiction and immediately recognizable. In stark contrast to the PG film subject's hands are in fact proportionate to the rest of her. It seems that Hollywood needs to look elsewhere for the perfect duplication. Particular examples of increasingly obscure 70s television shows give us a hint as to how to attempt a fake, but to convincingly demonstrate that money cannot buy a Sasquatch. It is more productive to look to the big guns of the Hollywood production line, the movies with the biggest bankrolls and which are most frequently pointed to by the detractors. Setting aside the overdone efforts more for satire than realism, such as Harry and the Hendersons, there are a handful of realistic contenders. Case number 1, Damn Dirty Hoaxers. As the heartfelt children's tale The Boy Who Cried Wolf has endeavored to teach us, the biggest problem with lying all the time is that no one believes you when you tell the truth. Enter John Chambers, the costume man of the 1960s. He was the man to ask if you needed an outfit, and he had recurring credits on 60s TV staples such as Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and all the best movies of the time, including the work that won him an Oscar, Planet of the Apes. Because he was the best, it was assumed yet unconfirmed that the PG film was his handiwork. It was assumed with such conviction that apparently no one ever bothered to ask him. Eventually, 30 years later, someone finally did ask him, and he denied it. Considering that Patterson himself had been dead up to 25 years, for Chambers to continue any pretense at that point would be meaningless. The story survived for 30 years via a friend of a roommate of a second cousin, second-hand sort of rumor. Everyone in the costume industry believed it. No one ever questioned it. It was just assumed. All because Chambers made a little movie at about the same time called Planet of the Apes. Well, was it any good? Sure, the actors looked passably like simians. Not that it was easy. Chambers saved himself untold work by putting clothes on his apes. Every ape is clothed from wrists to ankles, and often shoes or boots, which completely render moot the issue of any anatomy underneath. We have hairy hands and heads to judge the apes by, and that is it. But that is enough. The hairy hands are a perfect case study of getting gloves first and working your way backward. The fingers are separate and identifiable, contrasting with the wrists where thick hair fully engulfs the forearm seam with the cuff of the shirt, as was the intent. Most of the apes wear shoes, but on the few that do not, the pattern is repeated at the ankles. Which brings us to the head. It looks like a chimp or gorilla or orangutan. It has the proper jaw extension, the protruding brow line, and head crest. As mentioned before, the illusion has to end with the neck, and it ends in a cheat of beards on the males and females that jump 3 to 4 inches in length to hide the collars and necks of our simian actors. The faces, however, were more than enough to impress the Academy voters, despite the fact that Chambers didn't even attempt to fabricate plausible weight and bulk for his apes. Every ape, even the largest species, was a mere foot deep and a foot and a half across, looking exactly like a human with a gorilla head on top. Chambers probably very well could have placed foam padding in the outfits to beef up his simians, had foam padding existed at that time. And if he was willing to risk extreme heat stroke for his actors who had to endure multiple shots outdoors in the hot sun, some of whom were even on horseback and others who had to chase wayward humans all through the ape village, Chambers realized the impossibility and let his heads and hands do all the talking for him. And it worked. For a movie anyway. But the PG film it was not. Case study number 2. 30 years ago in a creek bed far, far away. Almost lost in the debate is perhaps one of the most serious attempts to duplicate the PG film subject, and Chewbacca deserves special attention. This particular attempt is hand in hand with a fantasy story, which has more than likely led to people absent-mindedly overlook it in favor of feeding their minds on more innocent pursuits. But you can't miss him. 7 feet tall, more hair than a teddy bear factory. We can only be talking about Chewbacca, complete with his emotion-sensitive face. He might even be used for a good Sasquatch fake, had Star Wars been a forgotten bomb back in the days of disco. So let's examine him. Played by 7-foot-tall actor Peter Mayhew, whose previous job was a gold-plated Minotaur in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, he certainly fits the bill. Size 20 feet, brown 6-inch yak hair all over every body part, except the soles of his feet, an inhuman/human hybrid face. Now, it is a common misconception that George Lucas has always been rolling up to his eyeballs in cash. But truth be told, in 1976, during Star Wars filming, he was counting his nickels and dimes, always short of money, recycling props and sets to stretch his dollar, and even begging 20th Century Fox for more money for one last week of shooting to ensure he did not end up with cheesy aliens, and got current master Rick Baker to make him good aliens, with Baker himself as one of the musicians in the Cantina Band. He did not have infinite money to throw at his costume troubles, but nevertheless, Chewbacca was top of his list of priorities. Chewbacca had to look anything except a guy in a monkey suit, and Lucas's costume creators pulled out all the tricks. Problem: despite being an alien, Chewbacca has 5 fingers, coincidentally, like every other human in the movie. Solution: you never see his fingers. Chewbacca's hands are irrevocably obscured by excessively long and tangled tufts of hair. The actor might even be wearing pink and yellow mittens for all the audience can tell. His hands are completely obscured, and it is no accident. Problem: the costume is put on in pieces, leaving seams everywhere. Solution: Chewbacca does not have a single hair under 8 inches in length. It hangs off his forearms, off his wrists, around his ankles, down his back, everywhere. Try to find some open skin. They were very careful to ensure that you would see none. All the seams are carefully obscured, and it only took about 10 pounds of extra hair. It is cheap after all. Problem: the head is a solid unit with springs and supports to give the actor control over facial functions, which has to blend with the flimsy rug nature of the rest of the outfit. Solution: did I say hair? I meant a mop. The hair along the rim of the Chewbacca helmet is easily another 3 inches longer than anywhere else. It comes down far enough to easily blend in with the shoulders, leaving our Wookiee with no neck whatsoever. So much the better, as necks only give us wrinkles and make monsters look like humans in masks. Hair is also on top, giving our actor another inch or 2 in height. Although the costume makers had apparently solved the problem, when they were presented 6 years later with the same challenge again on a smaller scale with the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, they elected to skip the problem altogether by putting hoods on every furry creature there was, figure 9. Production notes detailing the Ewoks' construction even say right there on the Lucasfilm letterhead, use hoods to hide seams. Our final presentation? A seamless, fur-covered walking carpet that suspended everyone's disbelief, perhaps prematurely, as there were other problems that were not addressed by the Chewbacca builders. Problems that they probably could not have known along the lines of anatomy. Despite being 7 feet tall and then some, Chewbacca is a scarecrow, being thin as well a human. Now is a good time to bring the PG film subject into this. She is plenty thick, both in depth and width. Depth can be easily fixed with foam padding under the fur, as costumers are usually too proud to demonstrate. Width, however, is not only a superhuman jump in difficulty, it is almost never even attempted, and Chewbacca did not even try.